Nobody wanted her, until a rancher called her my home. In one of these forgotten corners, a small dog shuffled along, her paws scraping the hard ground as she moved cautiously. She was thin, her ribs showing through patches of fur that had grown uneven and tangled from months without care. Her coat was dusty and matted, and though she tried to hold herself tall and proud, her drooping tail told a story of loneliness and defeat. No one seemed to notice her. People hurried past, pulling their coats tightly around them, avoiding eye contact. Some glanced at her briefly and shook their heads. Others simply ignored her completely. She had learned early that humans could be dangerous, that most of them only cared about their own lives and had no time for a stray like her. Even the occasional scraps thrown from a passing car felt more like a test than kindness, and she learned to snatch them quickly before disappearing into the shadows. The small dog had a name once, though she could barely remember it. Her human, if she had one, was gone now. She did not know whether they had abandoned her or if they had simply disappeared, leaving her to fend for herself. But the memory lingered like a soft, fading song, memories of warm hands, gentle voices, and soft blankets that no longer existed in her life. Those memories were now replaced by hunger, cold, and a constant sense of being unwelcome. She moved from alley to alley, searching for something to eat, something to drink, some small comfort in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. She sniffed around the trash bins, careful not to get too close to the humans walking past. Once, a man had shouted at her, waving a stick, and she had darted away, heart pounding, until she was hidden behind a row of crates. Her body trembled not just from fear, but from the chill in the early morning air. Rain had come the night before, and the streets were slick with mud. The smell of wet earth mixed with the stench of old garbage, and the small dog hated it but had no choice. She found a broken-down porch at the edge of an old building and curled up as best as she could. The boards were rough against her fur, and the wind blew sharply, slipping through the cracks and chilling her tiny body. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep was never easy when hunger and fear were constant companions. She remembered the days when she had a safe place to sleep, a warm bed to curl up in, and food waiting for her without the fear of being shooed away or hit. Now those memories were like distant stars, bright but unreachable. She had learned to keep moving, to avoid humans, to survive on scraps, and to hide when the world became too loud or too dangerous. And yet, despite all the hardship, she never stopped wagging her tail at the rare smile or kind word from a stranger, even though most of the time, kindness was fleeting. Her stomach growled loudly, a reminder that survival was never simple. She spotted a small cardboard box near the side of a shop. Carefully, she sniffed it, hoping for even a morsel of food left behind. It was empty, save for a few soggy crumbs and a faint smell of bread long gone stale. She pressed her nose into it anyway, inhaling the faintest hint of something familiar. Sometimes, the smallest scent could bring hope, but more often than not, it only reminded her of what she lacked. The day grew warmer, but the streets remained harsh. She saw children running to school, laughing and holding hands with friends. She watched from the shadows, her eyes following them, wishing that someone would notice her with the same joy, wishing that someone would reach down and call her a name, offer her warmth, safety, and love. But the world seemed too busy, too distracted to see a small, lonely dog wandering the streets. A few people stopped, tossing a scrap of bread or a leftover sandwich. She approached cautiously, remembering that sometimes humans could be unpredictable. One woman reached out to touch her but quickly pulled back, saying something about how strays could bite. The small dog recoiled, her ears flattening against her head. Even when help was offered, it came with fear or caution, and that only reinforced the belief that she truly belonged nowhere. By afternoon, the streets emptied somewhat, and the dog wandered to the outskirts of town. She found a small ditch, partially covered by overgrown grass, and settled there to rest. The sun shone warmly on her back, and for a moment she felt almost safe. Almost. But as shadows lengthened and the sounds of trucks and footsteps echoed in the distance, the unease returned. She lifted her head, ears twitching, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Every day was a balance between hope and fear, hunger and survival. The nights were the hardest. The town grew quiet, save for the occasional bark of another stray, the wind rustling through broken fences, and the distant hum of a car engine. She shivered under the broken porch, wishing for warmth, wishing for a hand to pat her, wishing for someone to tell her she was safe. But the nights were long, cold, and silent. She dreamed of running through green fields, of a soft bed to sleep in, and of a voice calling her by a name filled with love instead of abandonment. Despite all the hardships, she never gave up entirely. She kept moving, kept searching, kept hoping. Even with hunger gnawing at her belly, even with cold seeping into her bones, she lifted her head to look for the next opportunity, the next chance at kindness. Something inside her refused to let her stop believing that somewhere, somehow, there might be a place where she was wanted, a place where she could finally belong. And so she wandered day after day, night after night, through streets that ignored her existence, through alleys that offered no comfort, through lives that seemed too busy to notice a small, scrappy dog. But she carried a quiet hope, fragile yet persistent, that one day someone would see her, truly see her, and call her more than just a stray. That one day she might find a place that felt like home. Until that day came, she would keep walking, keep searching, and keep her heart open just a little bit. Because even in a world that seemed full of rejection and indifference, she believed that love could exist somewhere. And for a dog like her, that belief was the only thing stronger than fear. Days turned into weeks, and the small dog's life in the shadows became a rhythm of survival. She had grown leaner, her fur rougher, and her eyes sharper, not from malice but from the constant need to stay alert. Every sound, a door slamming, a footstep on a sidewalk, the bark of another dog could signal danger. And yet, through all of it, a tiny spark of hope remained alive in her heart. She would not give up completely, because somewhere deep inside, she remembered what it felt like to be cared for, to be wanted. Food remained the greatest challenge. The streets offered only scraps, and even those were often claimed by other strays before she could reach them. Garbage bins became her pantry, and alleyways her dining halls. Once, she found a half-eaten sandwich tossed behind a small cafe. She approached it cautiously, sniffed the air for signs of humans, and then devoured it quickly. The taste was not as sweet as she remembered, but it filled her belly and reminded her that even small victories mattered. She learned to become invisible in the town. During the day, she would hide under parked cars or behind abandoned crates. At night, she would slink silently through alleys, careful to avoid any human who might shoo her away or worse. Her life had become a careful dance of shadows, silence, and observation. She watched families through fences and windows, longing to feel a hand reach down to her, a voice calling her name with love. Each glimpse of normal life reminded her both of what she had lost and of what she still secretly dreamed of gaining. Despite the hardships, there were rare moments that lifted her spirits. On certain mornings, the sun would warm her fur just enough to make her forget the chill, and she would stretch, savoring the light. On days when the wind carried the scent of fresh bread from the bakery or the aroma of roasting meat from the diner, her nose twitched with hope and her tail would wag briefly. These small joys were her comfort, the little things that reminded her the world was not entirely cruel, but not all moments were kind. One afternoon, a group of children spotted her as she scavenged near a park. At first they giggled and tossed a few crumbs her way, which made her hesitant but curious. Then one boy decided it would be fun to chase her, waving a stick and shouting. Panic surged through her tiny body. She darted down a narrow alley, heart hammering, lungs burning, until she could finally hide behind a dumpster. The laughter echoed long after the danger passed, and she curled into herself, trembling. Experiences like these taught her that the world could be cruel, even to those who were innocent. Yet she also met moments of kindness, rare but unforgettable. A woman, tending her garden near the edge of town, noticed her watching from a distance. Instead of shooing her away, the woman placed a small dish of water on the curb and whispered softly, "Here, little one, drink. You're safe here for a moment." The dog approached slowly, wary but desperate. She lapped at the water, feeling a strange comfort in the gesture. For a fleeting moment, she felt seen, as if someone had recognized her existence beyond being a stray. That memory lingered, keeping her spirit alive. As the weeks passed, she began to avoid open streets altogether. The town had grown too dangerous, too unpredictable. She found refuge in old barns at the outskirts of the town, places where humans rarely ventured. The smell of hay, dust, and faint traces of animals that had once lived there filled her senses. It was not home, but it was safe. She could rest without being disturbed, curl up in hidden corners, and dream of a life she had almost forgotten. In the barns, she discovered other animals, some timid, some aggressive. She learned quickly which ones could be tolerated and which ones required distance. A lone cat, older and scarred, tolerated her presence but never invited friendship. Chickens clucked and scattered at her approach, and mice squeaked from hidden corners. Yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt that she was not entirely alone. She had companions of a sort, creatures who, like her, were struggling to survive in a world that had little concern for them. Hunger remained constant, but her instincts sharpened. She learned to recognize the sounds of human activity that indicated opportunities for food. The clatter of a dumpster lid, the smell of a bakery opening its doors, the distant hum of a grocery truck unloading. Each opportunity required careful timing, courage, and quick action. One wrong move could mean being chased, injured, or scolded. Life had become a delicate balance of risk and reward, and she had mastered it with patience and cunning. Evenings were still the hardest. The town fell quiet, shadows lengthened, and loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She missed warmth, the warmth of a human hand, the warmth of a soft bed, the warmth of being called mine. She would curl up in her small corner of the barn, shivering despite the hay, and dream of fields she had never seen, of voices that might love her, and of a place where she could finally belong. Those dreams, fragile as they were, kept her moving forward, but there were signs that her life might change. Occasionally, she would see a figure at the edge of the property, someone who did not chase her away, who watched her with gentle curiosity rather than fear or anger. Her instincts told her to remain cautious. Experience had taught her that humans could bring danger, but a tiny flicker of hope ignited every time she saw that figure. She would retreat at first, hidden in the shadows, yet she found herself returning to watch from a distance. Perhaps, she thought, not all humans were unkind. Her body grew stronger despite the hardships. Her muscles, once frail, became lean and agile, capable of long runs to escape danger or chase after a rare opportunity for food. Her senses sharpened. The smell of water, the sound of footsteps, and the rustle of leaves became her constant guides. Life had made her resilient, and though she carried scars and fatigue, she also carried a quiet pride. She survived. She endured. She learned to navigate a world that had not been gentle, and in doing so, she had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. Yet, amid the struggle, the longing never faded. She still dreamed of a kind hand, a warm place to rest, and a voice that would call her by a name filled with love. And though the days were filled with scavenging, fear, and uncertainty, she kept that spark alive. It was small, fragile, and easily snuffed out, but it persisted. She hoped that one day, she would find someone who would see her not as a stray, but as a creature worthy of love, care, and a place to call home. As night fell over the outskirts of town, she curled into the hay once more, listening to the soft creak of the barn, the distant howl of another dog, and the whisper of the wind. Life had been harsh, unkind, and lonely, but she was still here. She had survived another day. And somewhere in the quiet corners of her heart, she held on to hope. A hope that one day her life would change, that the loneliness would end, and that she would find a human who would call her their own. The nights were long, the days were uncertain, but the small dog refused to give up. Each moment of survival was a testament to her courage, and each fleeting kindness she encountered reminded her that the world was not entirely cruel. She waited, watched, and hoped, knowing that one day, perhaps soon, something, or someone, would appear that could transform her life forever. The early morning sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The small dog stirred in her usual hiding spot, beneath the tall grass by the edge of a quiet field. The barn she had claimed as her temporary home was silent, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but the warmth of the rising sun gave her strength, reminding her that the day held possibilities she could not yet imagine. As she stepped carefully through the dew-soaked grass, she noticed movement in the distance. A man was walking along the fence line, his boots crunching softly against the soil. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a jacket dusted with the light dirt of farm work. His steps were slow, deliberate, and something in the way he carried himself made the dog pause. There was no urgency, no harshness, no anger in his movements. He seemed calm, patient, and perhaps most importantly, safe. The dog froze, instinctively shrinking into the shadows. Years of survival had taught her that humans were unpredictable. Some offered kindness, fleeting as it often was, and others brought danger. But something about this man drew her in, a quiet energy that whispered of patience and understanding. She took a cautious step forward, then another, keeping her body low to the ground, eyes fixed on him. She wanted to know if he would chase her, shoo her away, or offer the usual mix of curiosity and fear that had become so familiar. The man noticed her immediately, though he did not move suddenly or make a threatening sound. Instead, he knelt down, lowering himself to the dog's level. His hat tilted slightly, casting a shadow over his face, but his eyes were gentle, kind, and filled with a curiosity that felt safe. He extended a hand slowly, palm open, a universal gesture of peace. The dog's heart raced. She wanted to run, as she had so many times before, but something in his calm demeanor made her hesitate. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt the possibility of trust stirring in her chest. "Hello there, little one," the man said softly. His voice was quiet, smooth, and filled with warmth. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The dog's ears twitched and she took a tentative step closer. She sniffed the air, picking up the scent of the man, earth, leather, and a faint trace of food. Her stomach growled, reminding her that hunger had been her constant companion for days. Slowly, she approached his outstretched hand, nose twitching, eyes cautious but curious. He remained still, patient, giving her time to decide whether she could trust him. Finally, she pressed her nose gently against his palm. The man smiled, and she felt something she had almost forgotten: comfort. For the first time, a human's touch was not harsh, not fleeting, not laced with fear or anger. It was steady, kind, and accepting. She wagged her tail slightly, a small but significant gesture, signaling the first spark of trust between them. The man chuckled softly. "There you go," he said. "You're safe. You don't have to worry anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bowl. Carefully, he placed it on the ground and filled it with water. The dog approached slowly, lapping at it eagerly. The cool liquid quenched her thirst and revitalized her body. As she drank, the man remained still, patient, allowing her to take her time. She realized in that moment that she had found someone different, someone who did not see her as a stray, a nuisance, or a burden. He saw her as a living creature deserving of care and respect. After drinking, she retreated a few steps, uncertain of what to do next. The man remained still, his eyes following her with quiet patience. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "I think we can be friends if you'll let me." Something about those words resonated deep within her. For the first time in her life, she considered the possibility that she could belong somewhere, that she could be more than a stray. She inched closer, sniffing him again, testing the safety of his presence. He did not flinch, did not move away, and his steady gaze reassured her that he meant no harm. Days passed and the man returned each morning. He brought food, clean water, and gentle words. Slowly, the dog began to recognize the pattern. She would wait near the fence, eyes scanning for him, ears alert for the sound of his boots. When she saw him, she would approach cautiously, but now with anticipation rather than fear. Each visit strengthened the fragile bond forming between them. The man began to give her small gifts, bits of bread, scraps of meat, and treats he would cut into tiny pieces so she could eat safely. He spoke to her as he worked around the ranch, explaining what he was doing, telling stories of the animals on the property, and occasionally softly whispering her name. The dog, who had wandered the streets alone for so long, began to respond, recognizing the sound of her new name as a signal of safety and kindness. She discovered that the ranch was full of new scents, sights, and sounds. Horses neighed in the distance, chickens clucked near the barn, and the smell of hay and earth filled her senses. She was cautious at first, keeping her distance, observing everything carefully. But as the days went by, she began to explore, venturing further from the fence and discovering the open fields, the small ponds, and the hidden corners of the property. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of freedom and curiosity rather than fear and survival. The man, noticing her growing confidence, began to speak to her about the idea of a home. "You don't have to live out here forever," he said one morning, kneeling to meet her gaze. "There's a place for you, a safe place. You just have to trust me a little more." Trust was a difficult thing for her. Years of abandonment, hunger, and danger had made her wary of anyone who tried to get close. But the man's patience, kindness, and consistency slowly chipped away at her fear. She began to follow him around the property, sometimes staying close, other times exploring, but always returning to his side. It was a delicate dance of patience and understanding, each step forward a small victory for both of them. One day, after weeks of slow bonding, the man opened the gate to a larger field. "Come on," he said softly, "let's see what's out here." The dog hesitated, but something inside her told her it was safe. She stepped out, paws sinking into the soft grass, feeling the warmth of the sun on her fur. For the first time, she realized that the world could be beautiful, that life could hold joy beyond survival, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she was finally being given a second chance. The man watched her, smiling. "You're a smart girl," he said. "You've survived a lot, but it's time for something better. You've earned it." From that day on, their bond grew stronger. She began to follow him everywhere, learning the rhythms of the ranch, the sounds of the animals, and the comfort of a steady routine. She still had moments of hesitation, moments where fear crept back, but the man's presence became a source of reassurance. He was patient, kind, and unwavering, a stark contrast to the fear and uncertainty she had known for so long. For the first time in her life, the dog understood a simple truth. She was no longer alone. She was being seen, cared for, and offered a place to belong. The man's gentle words, steady presence, and daily acts of kindness were building something she had almost forgotten existed: trust. And with trust came hope, a fragile but powerful feeling that perhaps her life was about to change forever. The small dog had begun to feel something she had never felt before: safety. It was a strange, almost unbelievable feeling, as if the world had shifted slightly in her favor. The rancher's presence was constant but gentle, never forcing her, never rushing her. Each morning he would appear with food, a kind word and patience that seemed endless. Slowly she began to respond, not just out of hunger but out of curiosity and, surprisingly, a budding trust. She explored the ranch with cautious enthusiasm, learning that this place was different from the alleys and streets she had known. The smell of fresh hay, the earthy scent of the fields, and the occasional aroma of baked bread from the farmhouse made her feel alive in a way she had not for a long time. She discovered small ponds where she could drink clean water and fields where she could run freely, her legs stretching and her muscles growing stronger with every step. The wide-open spaces were terrifying at first, but they also gave her a sense of freedom she had never imagined. The rancher noticed her cautious approach to the new surroundings. He would speak softly, "Take your time, girl. There's no rush. You're safe here." And slowly, the dog began to explore more confidently. She learned the sounds of the other animals, the clucking of the chickens, the soft nicker of horses in the stables, and even the distant moo of cows grazing in the pasture. Each sound became familiar, each movement predictable, and with every passing day she felt a little more comfortable, a little less like an outsider in the world. Food became a source of comfort rather than a desperate necessity. The rancher provided meals at regular times, and she began to wait for him each morning, tail wagging faintly, ears pricked with anticipation. She realized that she didn't have to steal or scavenge anymore. The constant worry that had dominated her life for so long began to fade, replaced with the quiet security of a steady routine. She learned that she could trust this man not to harm her, not to abandon her, and not to treat her as a nuisance. The rancher gave her a name, Hope. At first it sounded strange to her ears, almost foreign, but the way he spoke it made her feel warmth. "Hope," he would call gently, and her tail would wag in response. Slowly she learned that this name was more than just a word, it was a promise. It meant she had a place in the world, that someone cared about her, that she was no longer invisible. Every time she heard it, her heart swelled with a feeling she had long forgotten, belonging. Trust, however, was not built overnight. There were moments when her old fears resurfaced. A sudden noise, a falling branch, a gust of wind, or a car driving past the property would make her flinch, ears flattening against her head, tail curling nervously. But the rancher never scolded her. He would kneel down, speaking softly, "It's okay, Hope. Nothing will hurt you. I'm right here." Slowly, the fear melted away, replaced by a sense of safety that grew stronger each day. She began to follow him everywhere, watching intently as he worked on the ranch. Sometimes he would repair fences, and she would observe from a safe distance. Other times, he would feed the chickens or tend to the horses, and she would sit nearby, learning the rhythm of life on the ranch. She discovered that she liked routine, that the world made sense when someone cared for you and guided you gently. Her previous life of chaos and survival was fading into memory, replaced with the structured, loving environment of her new home. The rancher began to introduce her to other animals with patience and care. At first, the horses were intimidating. They were tall, strong, and smelled of unfamiliar scents. But the rancher stayed with her, encouraging her with soft words and calm gestures. "See, they won't hurt you," he whispered. Slowly she approached a gentle mare, sniffing cautiously. The horse lowered its head and their noses touched briefly. Hope froze for a moment, then relaxed, realizing that this interaction was safe. Over time, she became friends with the animals on the ranch, learning their ways, understanding their signals, and finding joy in their companionship. Each day, the bond between Hope and the rancher grew stronger. He would scratch behind her ears, brush her fur, and speak softly about the work he was doing. She began to trust not just his presence, but his intentions, understanding that he was patient and kind in a way she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt secure enough to rest fully, curl up in the barn without fear, and even sleep through the night without waking at every sound. Hope also began to explore the open fields. Running across the soft grass, feeling the wind against her fur, she discovered a joy she had never known. Her legs moved freely, her body stretched and strengthened, and her heart filled with excitement. She would chase after birds, sniff the flowers, and roll in the soft grass, feeling alive in ways that had been impossible during her life on the streets. The rancher would watch, smiling, sometimes calling her back, and she would return obediently, knowing that he was her protector and her friend. Every small step she took was a victory. Every moment of trust, every wag of her tail, and every step into the open fields was a testament to her courage and resilience. Hope had survived hunger, cold, and loneliness, but now she was learning that life could hold love, safety, and happiness. She began to understand that she was no longer alone, that she had a home, and that the rancher cared deeply for her well-being. The rancher noticed the transformation as well. He often spoke to her as he worked, telling her stories of the ranch, the animals, and his own life. "You see, Hope," he said one day, "this is your place now, you belong here." Hearing these words, the dog felt a warmth in her chest that she had never known. Belonging was no longer a dream, it was real. She began to look forward to each day, excited to explore, learn, and simply exist in a place where she was wanted. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, the rancher knelt down beside her. He spoke softly, "You're not just a visitor anymore, Hope. This is your home. You've earned it." Hope's tail wagged gently, and she pressed her nose against his hand. In that moment, she understood fully that her life had changed forever. The streets, the alleys, the loneliness, they were memories now. Her present and her future was filled with love, trust, and the comfort of belonging. Hope continued to explore and grow, each day learning new lessons about safety, friendship, and the joy of companionship. She discovered that life was not just about survival. It was about experiencing love, trusting those who cared for you, and finding joy in small moments. Every meal, every gentle word, every touch of the rancher's hand was a reminder that she had finally found a place where she was truly wanted. The transformation was not just physical but emotional. Hope's eyes, once wary and haunted, now sparkled with curiosity and life. Her posture, once cautious and tense, became relaxed and confident. She moved through the ranch with the grace and freedom that had been missing for so long. Every interaction, every experience reinforced the bond between her and the rancher, creating a connection built on trust, patience, and mutual care. Evenings became a time of reflection for her. As she curled up in her soft corner of the barn, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch, the rustling of hay, the distant calls of animals, and the soft footsteps of the rancher, she felt contentment she had never imagined. The days of running, hiding, and fearing every sound were behind her. She was safe, loved, and cherished. She had a home, and she knew it. With each passing day, Hope's world expanded. She learned to play, to explore without fear, and to trust completely. The rancher's presence was steady and reassuring, a constant reminder that love was not fleeting, that she could relax, and that she belonged. She had finally found what she had been searching for all her life, a place where she was wanted, a place where she could simply be. Hope's heart, once full of fear and longing, now overflowed with gratitude and joy. She had survived the streets, endured loneliness, and weathered hunger, but all of that had led her to this moment. The bond she shared with the rancher was unbreakable, built on patience, trust, and unconditional care. She had found her place in the world, a home that welcomed her completely, a life filled with love, safety, and belonging. And in that quiet, golden light of the evening, as she lay beside the rancher, Hope understood fully. She was finally home. The small dog, now known as Hope, had finally settled into the rhythm of ranch life. The days were filled with exploration, gentle routines, and the warmth of knowing she belonged. Yet, Even though she had grown confident and happy, there was still a quiet curiosity in her heart. She wanted to understand this place fully, to discover every corner of her new home, and to enjoy every moment of safety she had been given. The rancher had become her constant companion, her guide, and most importantly, her family. Each morning, Hope would wake with the first light of dawn. She had learned the sound of the rancher's footsteps and would rush to greet him, tail wagging, ears perked, eyes full of excitement. He would kneel down, pat her head, and offer a gentle smile. "Good morning, Hope," he would say softly, his voice filled with warmth and affection. Those words, simple yet profound, had become a signal of safety, love, and the start of a day filled with possibility. Breakfast was no longer a hurried scramble or a stolen morsel. The rancher provided her with fresh food, placed carefully in a clean bowl. Hope would eat slowly, savoring each bite, knowing she would not have to fear for her next meal. The security of a steady routine brought her comfort, and she began to relax in ways that had been impossible during her life on the streets. She would rest afterward in the barn, her body stretched out on a soft bed of hay, basking in the sunlight streaming through the cracks of the wooden walls. The ranch was a playground of sights, sounds, and smells. Horses nickered softly, chickens clucked busily, and cows grazed calmly in the distance. Hope had explored these animals carefully, learning to approach them with caution at first, and later with confidence. The horses had become her friends, allowing her to sniff them and walk alongside them. She had learned the language of the farm animals, the sounds they made, the signals they gave, and she had found joy in their companionship. Each interaction strengthened her sense of belonging and reminded her that she was part of something larger, a family of creatures and people who cared for one another. The rancher's patience and kindness were never-ending. He would talk to her as he worked, explaining what he was doing, pointing out the birds in the trees, or simply sharing stories about the ranch. "Look over there, Hope," he would say, pointing toward a small pond where ducks swam lazily. "Isn't it beautiful? You get to see this every day now." She would tilt her head, sniffing the air, then nuzzle his hand in response. It was as if she understood him completely, recognizing that these moments were part of the gift of a safe, loving home. Trust, which had been fragile at first, was now complete. Hope no longer flinched at sudden noises or unexpected movements. She had learned that the rancher's presence meant safety, that no harm would come to her, and that she could rely on him completely. Even the once intimidating aspects of the ranch, the loud machinery, the barking of other dogs, the sudden flapping of wings, were now met with curiosity rather than fear. Her world had expanded in ways she had never imagined possible, and each day brought new discoveries and small joys. The bond between Hope and the rancher deepened every day. He would call her name and she would come running, tail wagging furiously, eyes sparkling with excitement. Sometimes he would sit in the grass and allow her to curl up beside him, resting her head on his lap. The warmth and comfort of these moments created a sense of security that Hope had never known before. She began to understand what it truly meant to be loved, to have someone care for her unconditionally, and to feel that her life had value beyond mere survival. Hope also discovered play. Running across the open fields, chasing shadows, or rolling in the grass became a daily delight. She learned to enjoy the sensation of the wind against her fur, the feeling of soft earth beneath her paws, and the freedom to explore without fear. Her body grew strong, her movements graceful, and her spirit light. Each day, she experienced more joy, more love, and more confidence, knowing that she had a home and a human who cared deeply for her. Visitors to the ranch began to notice the transformation as well. Once timid, shy, and cautious, Hope now approached people with curiosity and a gentle confidence. She would sniff them carefully, wag her tail, and even offer a soft bark as a greeting. The rancher would smile and introduce her, telling them her story, the story of a little dog who had been abandoned, who had survived the streets, and who had finally found a home. The visitors would marvel at the change, often moved to tears by the courage and resilience of this small, brave creature. As the sun dipped toward the horizon each evening, casting golden light across the fields, Hope would follow the rancher back to the barn. She would settle into her soft bed, ears flicking at the gentle sounds of the other animals, body relaxed, heart content. She no longer feared the night, no longer wondered if she would find food or safety. Her life had been transformed, and she understood fully that she was part of a family, that she was loved, and that she belonged. One quiet evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the rancher knelt beside her and spoke softly. "You're my home now, Hope," he said, his hand resting gently on her head. The words sank deep into her heart. She pressed her nose against his hand, tail wagging slowly, eyes closing in contentment. She understood that she was finally safe, finally loved, and finally where she belonged. For the first time in her life, she did not have to search for a home, she had one, in every sense of the word. Hope's life continued with this rhythm of love, safety, and joy. She explored the ranch each day, played with the animals, and enjoyed the warmth of the sun and the softness of the earth beneath her paws. She followed the rancher everywhere, learning from him, trusting him, and returning his love with every wag of her tail and every gentle nuzzle. The bond they shared was unbreakable, built on patience, kindness, and unwavering care. Over time, Hope also became a symbol of hope for others. The rancher's neighbors would visit, and children would watch her run and play, inspired by the story of her journey from abandoned stray to cherished companion. She had survived hardship, hunger, and fear, but she had also discovered the transformative power of love, patience, and trust. Her story reminded everyone who heard it that even the most forgotten and lonely beings could find happiness and belonging when someone chose to care for them. As the years went by, Hope aged gracefully. She grew wiser, calmer, and more affectionate. The once timid, scared dog had become confident, playful, and deeply loved. Every corner of the ranch, every animal, every gentle touch from the rancher was part of her life, part of her home. She no longer wandered the streets, no longer feared humans, no longer felt the emptiness of abandonment. She had found her place in the world, and she cherished it fully. And so, in the golden light of each day, with the rancher by her side, Hope lived the life she had always dreamed of but had never believed possible. She ran through the fields, explored the barns, played with the animals, and basked in the warmth of love and security. She had survived the streets, endured loneliness, and weathered the hardships of life, but all of it had led her to this moment. Finally, Hope understood that home was not just a place, but a feeling of safety, love, and belonging. And with the rancher's hand resting gently on her head, voice soft in her ears and heart full of warmth, she knew that she had truly found it. She had been lost, abandoned, and unwanted, but now she was wanted, cherished, and loved beyond measure. For the first time, Hope could rest completely, knowing she was home, knowing she was loved, and knowing that her life, once full of struggle and fear, was now full of joy, trust, and belonging. And in that moment, as the sun set over the fields of the ranch, she closed her eyes, curled up beside the one who had saved her, and felt a peace she had never known, a peace that whispered gently in her heart. She was finally home.